Hi, I'm your host Vasco Duarte. Welcome to the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, where we share tips and tricks from Scrum Masters around the world. Every day, we bring you inspiring answers to important questions that all Scrum Masters face day after day. Hello everybody, welcome to one more week of the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, and this week joining us from Aarhus in Denmark is Bent Myllerup. Hey Bent, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Bent is a management consultant, organizational change agent, and agile transformation coach with 20 plus years of personal experience in management and leadership. He holds a master in management development from Copenhagen Business School and a Bachelor in Science of Electronic Engineering. He was the first European Certified Scrum Coach, and he's also a Certified Scrum Trainer. So a lot of stuff there to talk about. But Bent, why don't you take a second, tell us a little bit more about yourself and how did you end up becoming a Scrum Master?
Yes, that's actually, I think myself a funny story. So I was more than 15 years ago, I was a project manager in a company. And I was a project manager for a product we were developing, patient records for hospitals. And for those, at least those who listen from Denmark knows that was a terrible project. Really failure, big failure. I even burned out with stress having that job. So I got interested in are there other ways to do stuff, right? Because this more traditional way of working didn't seem to fit what we were trying to do. I got interested in systemic coaching and started taking education as systemic coach. On the way there, now being the head of a department in a company, somebody introduced me to Scrum and say, hey, we're going to look at this as well, right? And we then got interested. We took, I think we're back in 2006, we took like a certified Scrum Master training, and then we began to implementing Scrum. And some of the things I saw was that with my background as a systemic coach, that I could see that the coaching and the Scrum went very well hand in hand. So there I got very interested in coming beyond the basics of Scrum, looking into also what is it you do when you are coaching teams and so on. So my journey as a Scrum Master was from failure as a project manager and then trying to look for new things.
I've heard that story many times. I've said it also sometimes here on the podcast that that's a little bit my own story as well. I'm what I would call a recovering project manager. Sometimes I still use. Yes. Sometimes I still use some of those tools, but I try not to. Yes. But of course, I mean, that's not the only failure we go through. And today, especially because it's Fail Monday here on the Scrum Master Toolbox podcast, we want to look at something you've learned, a big lesson you've learned as a Scrum Master and as a coach. So we want to dive into one of those stories, Ben. So tell us a story of a moment where you as a Scrum Master, you did your best. But at that time, as it often happens, you still had a lot to learn. So share that story with us. We'll dive into the details later, but share the story first.
Yes. So actually, my biggest failure I had was once I worked as an Agile coach, where I was coaching a company and trying to help them together with a couple of my colleagues, trying to help them with making an Agile transformation. This engagement was sold through somebody else, right? And what I failed to do was that I failed to build up the expectations.
So Ben, tell us a story of failure. And of course, we talk about failure because we want to learn from it. We want to take the insights you got from that story and apply it to our own work. So share that story with us, Ben.
Yes. So I once worked with a team where there was a kind of a rotten apple in the team. So there was one person who has actually not bought into this Agile way of working, right? This way of mutual accountability and going for shared goals.
So how did that look like, for example, in the stand-ups? Like what did that look like?
Well, in the stand-ups, it looked like, well, I have nothing to tell because I'm still working on this and that, right? And why are the others even interested in what I'm doing, right? In the retrospectives, like, well, they already know, the others already know what's the challenge for me and so on. So why should I spend time on telling this anyway, right? Always questioning, setting up goals and setting up shared goals. And so both the team and I was kind of the Agile coach in that setup. I was also the manager in that setup. You might discuss if that was a good blend, but I was young, so that might also have been a failure, actually. We really tried to get that person on board, and we tried to many facilitations, many discussions about conflict, but it never really got better. And at some point, I began to realize that this accepting or not, at least not getting rid of this behavior, actually started influencing the motivation of the others. And we got into this situation, I think you call it the broken window syndrome, right? Out of when there's one broken window in an abandoned house, then the other windows start breaking as well. And I could see that the morale in the team got worse and worse. So the big failure on this was that we simply we're not able to end this problem here.
If you had to go back to that point in time with the knowledge and the experience you have today, what would you do differently?
What I would have done different today is that I've been very much more firm on these self-organization happens within certain conditions, certain guardrails. And here, my friend, are the conditions on which you work, right? And if you cannot align or accommodate with those, then it's probably better that you are somewhere else.
I think this is a very important point. Like very often, I remember myself as a young manager having to fire to go through this firing process for the first time, and how hard it was even to get to that decision. Like it had been obvious for several weeks that this needed to happen, and we were coming up to the end of the trial period, which is something that happens here in Finland, where I live. You get 6 months to prove that you can bring value in, and either you or the company, if you don't come to a shared conclusion that there's value, you can split ways peacefully, and there's no need for any extra long process. But the problem is, if you go over the 6 months, it becomes a much bigger problem, right? Because then you have to involve HR, you have to do certain types of processes that take a long time to go through. And for me, the difficult part was accepting. I already knew this person had to leave, but was accepting that, okay, it was my job to take on the responsibility to make that person leave, even though the team was the one saying that this person needs to leave, but it was me as the manager that needed to take that responsibility. How about you? What was the hard part about that?
For me, it was a little different because I have this value of always give people the benefit of a doubt, right? So I had this I don't want to give up on this person, right? So giving this person chance after chance, right? And me giving that person chance after chance, I did not realize that giving that person chance after chance had a bad influence on the rest of the team. And in the end, the rest of the team was very direct with me and say, this guy needs to go now. Can you please take your responsibility and do that? Absolutely. And then I of course said it right. This person has been working for the company for many years, right? So it was a long process, I can share with you.
Yeah, I think the idea that the team can even step up and say, hey, this person needs to leave, that's already a success on your part, right? Like the team had the ease to come to you and talk about it, because in many teams out there, they can't talk about it. It's the unspoken reality, right? Like everybody thinks, okay, this person needs to leave, but you never do anything about it because you're not allowed to talk about it. So I think that's a success already if the team was able to come to you and share.
The team was on the step to become a very mature team, right? And it was actually the only thing that was hindering them in being a very mature team. So in many ways, looking back on it today, it was a sign for me that well, we are having a potential high-performing team here, that they dare say these things very direct to me. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And a great story, even though it's not necessarily the happiest of stories, it's a very important stories.
Yeah, definitely. That's also part of it, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you for sharing the story, Bent.
You're welcome.
Part of a successful Scrum Master job is to help the product owner. Tomorrow we explore that critical role in Scrum, the product owner role. Tune in to learn about product owner anti-patterns, what you can do to help the product owner, and a real-life example of what a great product owner is and what made it so. Tomorrow on our Friday Product Owner episode. See you tomorrow. We really hope you liked our show. And if you did, why not rate this podcast on Stitcher or iTunes? Share this podcast and let other Scrum Masters know about this valuable resource for their work. Remember that sharing is caring.